Amelia Carter was the embodiment of creativity and warmth. At 29, she had built a life she was proud of in the bustling city of Crestwood, Texas, where her artistic talents flourished. As a graphic designer, she was known for her ability to turn abstract ideas into striking visuals that captivated her clients. Outside of work, Amelia dedicated her time to volunteering at art workshops for children and organizing events for her close circle of friends. Her life was vibrant, filled with color and energy, much like her personality. Her world seemed even brighter after meeting Lucas Bennett, a prominent architect in Crestwood. Their paths had crossed at an art gala 2 years earlier, and their connection was instant. Lucas, with his polished demeanor and confident charm, appeared to be the perfect partner. His admiration for Amelia's creativity complemented his structured and detail-oriented approach to life. Their relationship blossomed, and when Lucas proposed during a surprise trip to Napa Valley, Amelia accepted without hesitation. To her family and friends, Lucas was a dream come true, handsome, successful, and devoted to Amelia. As the wedding date approached, Amelia immersed herself in planning every detail. Her artistic touch was evident in the hand-drawn invitations, the carefully chosen color palette, and even the floral arrangements. It was clear that she poured her heart into creating a celebration that reflected her personality and her love for Lucas. Her excitement was contagious, and those around her eagerly anticipated the event, which was set to be a highlight of the season. Yet beneath the surface of her happiness, there were subtle signs of unease. Amelia's closest friends began noticing small but unsettling changes in her demeanor. She was quieter during their gatherings and often seemed distracted. When asked, Amelia would attribute her mood to the stress of wedding preparations, brushing off their concerns with a smile. However, those closest to her, particularly her best friend Sophie Adams, sensed that there was more to her silence than she was willing to share. Lucas's role in the wedding planning process also raised questions. While it was not unusual for a groom to take an interest in the details, Lucas's level of involvement was extraordinary. He insisted on approving every decision, from the guest list to the catering menu. At first, Amelia framed this as a sign of his commitment to their life together, but over time, his behavior began to feel controlling, as he subtly overrode her choices and dismissed her opinions. Sophie noticed how Amelia's natural confidence seemed to waver in Lucas's presence, a shift that was hard to ignore. Despite these moments of doubt, Amelia remained focused on her future. She often spoke about her dreams of starting a family, traveling the world, and one day opening her own design studio. Her parents, Susan and Daniel Carter, were thrilled to see their daughter so happy and believed she was embarking on a promising new chapter. Lucas appeared to be a stable and supportive partner, someone who would stand by Amelia's side as she pursued her goals. But as the wedding day drew closer, Amelia's unease became harder to conceal. She confided in Sophie about minor disagreements with Lucas, mentioning how he had recently taken an unusual interest in their finances. Amelia had discovered documents related to Lucas's debts and an unresolved lawsuit, but she dismissed these concerns, reasoning that everyone carried some baggage. Sophie urged her to take a closer look, but Amelia assured her that everything would work out. Then came the day that changed everything. 3 weeks before the wedding, Amelia was scheduled to attend her final dress fitting. She left her apartment in the morning, planning to meet Sophie for lunch afterward. When she didn't show up at the boutique or respond to calls and texts, Sophie initially assumed she had gotten caught up in last-minute errands. But as hours turned into a full day, worry set in. Later that evening, Amelia's car was discovered abandoned in a downtown parking garage. Her phone was found inside, its recent activity wiped clean. Friends and family gathered at her apartment, hoping for answers, but Amelia was nowhere to be found. Lucas, who reported her missing the following evening, claimed that Amelia had been under stress and might have needed some time alone. His calm demeanor and vague explanations only deepened the growing unease. In the days that followed, the vibrant and bustling life that Amelia had built came to an abrupt halt. Her friends and family were left grappling with a void, their questions met with silence. Crestwood City, a place known for its energy and creativity, became the backdrop for a chilling mystery that no one could have predicted. Amelia Carter, a beloved daughter, friend and fiancée, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a community desperate for the truth. Lucas Bennett was a man many admired in Crestwood City. As an accomplished architect, his name was often associated with modern high-rise projects in urban developments that shaped the city's skyline. Polished, professional, and undeniably charismatic, Lucas had cultivated a reputation that was both enviable and respectable. His relationship with Amelia Carter seemed like the perfect complement, an artistic and compassionate woman matched with a successful and ambitious man. To those who knew them, their upcoming wedding was the natural culmination of a love story that seemed picture-perfect. In the wake of Amelia's disappearance, Lucas maintained a composed demeanor, appearing cooperative with law enforcement and making public appeals for her safe return. To many, his calm and measured responses reflected a man doing his best to hold himself together under unimaginable stress. Yet to others, those who paid closer attention, there was something about Lucas's behavior that felt too controlled, too rehearsed. Investigators, led by Detective Aaron Delgado, began their inquiry by piecing together the timeline of Amelia's last known movements. Lucas had been the one to report her missing, explaining that he believed she might have left to clear her head after feeling overwhelmed by wedding preparations. He provided a detailed account of the evening before her disappearance, describing a quiet night at home, watching television. He claimed he had gone to bed early and only realized Amelia was missing the following morning when her side of the bed was empty. Despite his cooperation, small inconsistencies in Lucas's account began to emerge. Neighbors like Margaret Lewis, who lived one floor below the couple, described hearing a loud argument from their apartment late that night. The sounds were muffled but intense, punctuated by a loud crash, and then silence. Margaret admitted she hadn't thought much of it at the time, assuming it was just a heated disagreement. Only after hearing about Amelia's disappearance did she reconsider the significance of what she had heard. The next morning, Margaret noticed Lucas leaving the building early, carrying a large black duffel bag. She waved to him out of habit, but he didn't respond. Instead, he walked briskly to his car, loaded the bag into the trunk, and drove away. Margaret's description added a layer of intrigue to an already puzzling case, but it wasn't enough to draw any conclusions. As detectives delved deeper into Lucas's life, they began to uncover the contradictions between his public persona and the man he truly was. While his professional achievements were well documented, his personal relationships painted a more complicated picture. Former colleagues described him as brilliant but unyielding, a perfectionist who often clashed with others over minor details. Friends who had known him in his early career recalled a man who could be charming one moment and cold the next. One former girlfriend, who requested anonymity, described her relationship with Lucas as intense and consuming, ending abruptly after she began questioning his need to control every aspect of their lives. Financial records revealed another layer of complexity. Lucas had taken out several substantial loans in recent years, many of which appeared to be tied to failed investment properties. While financial strain alone didn't make him a suspect, it raised questions about his stability, especially as detectives discovered evidence suggesting Amelia's name might have been used in some of these dealings without her full knowledge. Amelia's best friend, Sophie Adams, provided further insight during her interview with detectives. She described how Amelia had confided in her about minor disagreements with Lucas in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. While Amelia had never expressed fear or mentioned anything alarming, she did seem increasingly preoccupied. Sophie recalled one particular conversation where Amelia had mentioned finding something on Lucas's computer that didn't feel right. Though she didn't elaborate, Sophie sensed it had left her unsettled. Meanwhile, surveillance footage from a nearby parking garage captured Lucas's car leaving the apartment complex early on the morning of Amelia's disappearance. The footage aligned with Margaret's account of his departure, but offered no concrete evidence of wrongdoing. What struck investigators as odd, however, was Lucas's decision to drive out of the city limits for over 2 hours, only to return later that afternoon. When asked about the trip, Lucas explained that he had gone for a drive to clear his head, an explanation Detective Delgado found curiously vague. A search of the couple's apartment revealed few obvious signs of a struggle. The space was impeccably clean, almost unnaturally so, as if it had been tidied recently. Forensic teams collected samples from several areas of interest, including the baseboards in the living room, where a faint stain appeared to have been scrubbed. preliminary tests suggested the presence of organic material, but further analysis was required to determine its origin. As the investigation progressed, Lucas's behavior began to draw attention. While he continued to cooperate with authorities, his responses during interviews grew increasingly measured. He avoided speculation about what might have happened to Amelia, steering conversations back to his belief that she would return. This avoidance, while not incriminating in itself, struck Detective Delgado as calculated, a man choosing his words with care rather than speaking from the heart. What troubled Delgado most was the absence of emotion. In his years handling missing persons cases, he had witnessed a range of reactions from loved ones: grief, anger, desperation. Lucas's calm demeanor stood out, not for its composure, but for its lack of spontaneity. It felt performative, as though Lucas were playing the role of a concerned fiancé rather than inhabiting it. Still, Delgado knew better than to jump to conclusions. Appearances could be deceiving, and until concrete evidence surfaced, Lucas remained one piece of a much larger puzzle. With the weight of public scrutiny growing and Amelia's family desperate for answers, the investigation pressed on, leaving no detail unexamined. As days turned into weeks, the mystery surrounding Amelia's disappearance deepened. Crestwood City, a vibrant and bustling metropolis, became the backdrop for a case that captivated the public's attention. The more detectives uncovered, the more questions arose, each detail adding to the enigma of what had happened to the radiant bride-to-be. And while Lucas Bennett remained a key figure in the investigation, the truth about his role, or lack thereof, was still just out of reach. The morning of Amelia Carter's disappearance began like any other in Crestwood City. The bustling streets outside her apartment hummed with the rhythm of daily life. Coffee shops filled with regulars, buses ferrying commuters, and pedestrians navigating the sidewalks with purpose. For Amelia, the day held a sense of anticipation. It was one of the final steps before her wedding, the fitting of her dress, an appointment she had looked forward to for weeks. Amelia was meticulous about her plans. She had scheduled the fitting early, hoping to avoid the midday rush, and planned to meet Sophie Adams for lunch afterward. Sophie, her closest friend and confidant, had been her rock throughout the whirlwind of wedding preparations. It was typical of Amelia to balance obligations with moments of joy, and her friends admired her ability to juggle so much with grace. But as the hours passed and Amelia failed to appear at either the fitting or the lunch, unease began to ripple through her circle of friends. Calls to her phone went unanswered. By mid-afternoon, Sophie's concern turned into alarm. She called Lucas Bennett, hoping he might have heard from Amelia, but his response left her with more questions than answers. Lucas mentioned that he hadn't seen Amelia since the previous evening, assuming she had left for her appointment as planned. His calmness struck Sophie as odd, but she brushed it off, telling herself that he was simply trying to stay composed. By evening, the situation escalated. Amelia's parents, Susan and Daniel Carter, were informed, and they immediately contacted the police to report her missing. Amelia's disappearance was entirely out of character. She was reliable, communicative, and never went long without checking in. The growing silence around her whereabouts felt ominous, an absence that seemed to echo louder with each passing moment. Detective Aaron Delgado and his team were quick to act. Missing person cases often hinged on the first 48 hours, and Delgado was determined to leave no stone unturned. The initial search began with Amelia's apartment, a modest but beautifully decorated space that reflected her artistic personality. Investigators noted its pristine condition. Nothing appeared out of place, no signs of a struggle, and her belongings seemed untouched. Yet something about the cleanliness felt unnatural, almost too perfect. The team moved to search her car, which was discovered in a downtown parking garage. Parked neatly, it offered no obvious clues. The doors were locked, and inside, her phone sat on the passenger seat, its screen dark. When investigators accessed the device, they found it wiped of recent activity. No calls, texts, or location data. This raised an immediate red flag. Amelia was not the type to delete her digital footprint, especially not without reason. Surveillance footage from the parking garage was reviewed, revealing Amelia's car entering early that morning. However, the driver's identity wasn't clear, as the angle of the camera obscured the view inside the vehicle. No footage showed her leaving the garage on foot, which deepened the mystery. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. As the investigation expanded, detectives began reconstructing Amelia's movements in the days leading up to her disappearance. Witnesses at the bridal boutique confirmed that she had not arrived for her fitting, but none reported seeing her that morning. Sophie provided a key detail, recalling their last conversation the evening before. Amelia had seemed distracted, mentioning that she had a lot on her mind, but not elaborating further. Sophie had urged her to talk about it, but Amelia had brushed it off, promising they would catch up over lunch. Meanwhile, Lucas Bennett remained cooperative, answering questions and allowing investigators to search the apartment he shared with Amelia. His account of the night before her disappearance mirrored what he had told Sophie: a quiet evening at home, followed by an early night. Lucas claimed to have woken up alone the next morning, assuming Amelia had left for her appointment. While his demeanor remained calm, Detective Delgado noted small inconsistencies in his timeline, details that didn't quite align with what neighbors had observed. Margaret Lewis, the neighbor who had overheard the argument the night before, came forward with her account. She described hearing raised voices but couldn't identify who had been speaking or what had been said. The argument, she noted, ended abruptly after a loud crash. When asked why she hadn't reported it earlier, Margaret admitted she hadn't thought much of it at the time. In a bustling apartment complex, such sounds were not uncommon. Margaret's testimony added a layer of intrigue, but stopped short of offering definitive answers. Investigators revisited the surveillance footage from the building's parking lot, noting Lucas's early departure the next morning. He was seen carrying a large duffel bag, placing it in the trunk of his car, and driving off. When questioned about this trip, Lucas explained that he had gone for a drive to clear his head, a habit he claimed helped him deal with stress. While Lucas's explanation was plausible, it left Delgado uneasy. The timing of his drive, coupled with the details of Margaret's account, painted a picture that demanded further scrutiny. Detectives began mapping Lucas's route using toll booth records and gas station transactions, hoping to pinpoint his movements. The route led them out of the city toward an area known for its construction sites and abandoned properties. Back in Crestwood City, the search for Amelia continued. Friends and family distributed flyers, organized search parties, and coordinated efforts with local authorities. The community rallied around the Carter family, offering support and solidarity during the agonizing wait for answers. Yet beneath the surface, whispers of speculation began to spread. Was Amelia's disappearance the result of foul play, or had she chosen to leave on her own? And if she had left, why? As Delgado and his team worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle, they found themselves grappling with more questions than answers. Every lead seemed to open another door, revealing new layers to a case that was growing more complex by the hour. The pristine apartment, the silent phone, the duffel bag in the parking lot, each detail hinted at a story yet to be fully uncovered. Amelia Carter's disappearance had left a void in the lives of those who loved her. Her absence was felt in every corner of the city, a stark reminder of how quickly a seemingly ordinary day could turn into a chilling mystery. And while the investigation was far from over, one thing was certain: the search for Amelia was only just beginning. As the days stretched into a week, the search for Amelia Carter intensified. Crestwood City became the epicenter of a growing mystery, drawing the attention of local news outlets and capturing the concern of its residents. Flyers bearing Amelia's smiling face were plastered on storefronts, bus stops, and community boards, a haunting reminder of her absence. Yet despite the public's support, investigators found themselves grappling with a case that seemed to grow more intricate with every step. Detective Aaron Delgado, methodical and unwavering, had seen his fair share of missing persons cases. But something about this one felt different. The absence of clear evidence, coupled with Amelia's spotless reputation, created a puzzle where every piece felt out of place. Delgado knew that time was critical. He also knew that beneath the surface of every mystery lay truths waiting to be uncovered. The discovery of faint bloodstains near the baseboards in Amelia and Lucas's apartment had given the investigation a much-needed lead. Forensic analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Amelia. While the amount wasn't indicative of a life-threatening injury, its presence raised significant questions. Coupled with the overly pristine state of the apartment, it hinted at an attempt to conceal something. Delgado ordered a more thorough sweep of the property, instructing his team to focus on overlooked areas like plumbing fixtures and hidden storage spaces. At the same time, Lucas Bennett's movements on the day of Amelia's disappearance continued to draw scrutiny. Toll booth records and gas station receipts traced his car to a rural area 2 hours outside Crestwood. The area, known for its abandoned industrial sites, was sparsely populated and rarely traveled. Surveillance footage from a gas station showed Lucas purchasing a canister of fuel and several bottles of water. These purchases, while not inherently suspicious, added to the growing list of circumstantial evidence. Delgado authorized a search of the area, hoping to uncover clues that could illuminate Lucas's actions during that crucial window of time. Meanwhile, Lucas's behavior came under closer examination. Colleagues described him as distracted and irritable in the days following Amelia's disappearance. Though he continued to cooperate with authorities, allowing further searches of his apartment and vehicle, his responses during interviews remained curiously measured. Delgado couldn't ignore the way Lucas deflected questions about Amelia's state of mind, often steering conversations back to his belief that she had simply left to clear her head. It felt rehearsed, as if Lucas were crafting a narrative rather than speaking from a place of genuine concern. A key breakthrough came when a member of Delgado's team uncovered a previously missed piece of surveillance footage from the parking garage where Amelia's car was found. The footage showed a second vehicle, a dark sedan, entering the garage shortly after Amelia's car had arrived. The driver was obscured and the car left the garage minutes later, taking an exit that bypassed the Main Street cameras. Investigators traced the vehicle to a rental company in Crestwood, discovering it had been rented under a false name with cash. The connection to Amelia's disappearance wasn't immediately clear, but it introduced the possibility of a second individual being involved. At the same time, attention turned to the faint threads of financial irregularities uncovered in Lucas's records. Investigators had learned that Lucas was carrying significant debt from failed investments, many of which he had concealed from Amelia. Bank statements revealed that a substantial loan had been taken out in Amelia's name without her knowledge, finalized just weeks before her disappearance. The loan application bore her forged signature, and emails recovered from Lucas's laptop showed his correspondence with a financial advisor about liquidating assets. Delgado suspected that Amelia had discovered these financial dealings, possibly triggering a confrontation with Lucas. Delgado's instincts told him they were closing in on something significant, but the case remained frustratingly elusive, with every answer spawning more questions. To add to the complexity, an anonymous tip came through the police hotline, directing investigators to a remote construction site outside the city limits. The caller claimed to have seen a man matching Lucas's description near the site in the early hours of the morning after Amelia's disappearance. While the tip couldn't be immediately verified, it aligned with Lucas's traced movements and the items he had purchased at the gas station. Delgado dispatched a team to the site, accompanied by search dogs trained in detecting human scent. The area was vast and desolate, filled with overgrown vegetation and scattered debris from long-abandoned structures. After hours of searching, one of the dogs alerted its handler to a shallow patch of disturbed earth near the edge of the property. The team unearthed a partially buried duffel bag, its contents carefully preserved. Inside were several items identified as belonging to Amelia: clothing, a small sketchbook she carried everywhere, and a pair of shoes that matched descriptions provided by her family. Though there were no immediate signs of foul play, the discovery shifted the investigation's tone. Amelia's belongings being found in such a remote location suggested someone had gone to great lengths to hide them. Back at the precinct, Delgado reviewed the mounting evidence with his team. While the case against Lucas was circumstantial, the pieces were beginning to align in troubling ways. His financial desperation, the inconsistencies in his timeline, and now the discovery of Amelia's belongings created a portrait of a man whose outward composure masked deeper turmoil. Yet Delgado knew that without definitive proof, their case remained incomplete. As investigators worked to analyze the contents of the duffel bag, another twist emerged. A forensic sweep of Lucas's car revealed trace amounts of soil that matched the composition of the disturbed ground at the construction site. Additionally, fibers consistent with Amelia's clothing were found embedded in the car's trunk lining. These findings brought Delgado closer to building a narrative, but he remained cautious. there were still gaps to fill, still unanswered questions about Amelia's fate. The media coverage surrounding the case intensified, amplifying public scrutiny and speculation. Lucas, who had once been seen as a grieving fiancé, now found himself the subject of whispered suspicions. His presence at public vigils, organized by Amelia's friends and family, was met with quiet skepticism, his composed demeanor interpreted as either strength or detachment, depending on who was asked. Despite this, Lucas continued to maintain his innocence, reiterating his belief that Amelia would return. For Delgado, the weight of the investigation loomed large. The discovery of Amelia's belongings was a breakthrough, but it wasn't the resolution her loved ones so desperately sought. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of uncovering something far darker than anyone had anticipated. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but the picture they formed remained just out of reach. The discovery of Amelia Carter's belongings at the construction site marked a significant turning point in the investigation. Yet for Detective Aaron Delgado and his team, it was only the beginning of a deeper dive into a web of secrets that seemed carefully woven around Amelia's disappearance. Every new clue uncovered painted a picture of deliberate actions, but the intent behind those actions remained obscured. As forensic specialists worked to analyze the items recovered from the duffel bag, one piece stood out immediately: Amelia's sketchbook. It was a small, leather-bound journal she carried everywhere, often filled with spontaneous drawings, notes, and ideas for her work. Many of the pages were typical of Amelia's style. Delicate sketches of urban landscapes and handwritten quotes she found inspiring. But tucked between pages near the back were more personal entries. Among them was a hastily scribbled note that read, "Found something I wasn't supposed to. Need to figure out how to confront him." The note electrified the investigation. Delgado interpreted it as a clear sign that Amelia had discovered something troubling shortly before her disappearance. Though it didn't specify what she had uncovered or who him referred to, the implications were impossible to ignore. The team now had a direct link between Amelia's state of mind and a potential motive for her disappearance. Delgado requested handwriting analysis to confirm the note's authenticity and began piecing together the events leading up to when it might have been written. Simultaneously, a breakthrough emerged in the financial aspect of the case. A deeper audit of Lucas Bennett's accounts uncovered multiple discrepancies. Beyond the loans taken out in Amelia's name, investigators found recent transfers to a shadowy account linked to an alias. The sums were significant, indicating Lucas had been funneling money out of his primary accounts for reasons that weren't immediately clear. Delgado wondered if this financial activity was tied to the mounting debts Lucas had tried to conceal, or if it was something more sinister. The pressure on Lucas intensified as investigators honed in on these financial irregularities. His calm demeanor, which had initially been seen as composed, now struck many as unnervingly detached. Lucas's interactions with Amelia's family became more strained. Her parents, Susan and Daniel Carter, began voicing their doubts about his account of events. Publicly, Lucas continued to appear cooperative, attending vigils and speaking to the press about his hopes for Amelia's return. But behind closed doors, Delgado knew they were closing in. As investigators dug deeper into Lucas's movements on the morning of Amelia's disappearance, they uncovered an unexpected lead. A local farmer whose property bordered the abandoned construction site where Amelia's belongings were found recalled seeing a dark sedan parked near the edge of the site around dawn. The farmer had assumed it belonged to someone hunting illegally in the area, but the sighting now aligned perfectly with Lucas's route. This testimony further corroborated the toll booth records and gas station receipts placing Lucas in the vicinity. Delgado's team also revisited the forensic findings from Lucas's car. Soil samples from the trunk had already matched the construction site, but additional testing revealed faint traces of an industrial cleaning agent in the carpeting. This finding raised more questions. If Lucas had simply been driving through the area, why would such an effort be made to clean his car afterward? To Delgado, it suggested an attempt to remove evidence, though exactly what evidence remained unclear. Amid these discoveries, attention turned once again to the mysterious dark sedan captured on surveillance footage in the parking garage where Amelia's car had been found. The vehicle, rented under a false name, remained untraced despite investigators' efforts. Delgado began to consider the possibility that Lucas hadn't acted alone. Could the sedan's driver have been an accomplice? If so, what role had they played in Amelia's disappearance? Delgado ordered a second round of interviews with key witnesses, including Lucas's neighbors and colleagues. Margaret Lewis, the neighbor who had overheard the argument the night before Amelia vanished, provided further context. She recalled the loud crash she had mentioned previously, but added a detail she hadn't thought significant earlier. Shortly after the crash, she heard the faint sound of water running. It had struck her as odd at the time, but she had dismissed it, assuming the couple was cleaning up after an argument. Now, with the context of the bloodstains found in the apartment, Delgado considered this detail crucial. Another neighbor who lived across the hall from Lucas and Amelia reported seeing a delivery arrive at their apartment 2 days before Amelia's disappearance. The package, which appeared heavy and was labeled as cleaning supplies, had been signed for by Lucas. While not damning in itself, the timeline added weight to the theory that actions taken before Amelia's disappearance were premeditated. Delgado's suspicions about Lucas's involvement deepened, but he remained cautious. The evidence, while increasingly compelling, was largely circumstantial. Lucas's defense could argue that the financial irregularities, cleaning supplies, and soil in his car didn't definitively link him to foul play. Without a body or concrete evidence tying him directly to a crime, Delgado knew the case risked faltering in court. Then came an unexpected twist. A forensic technician analyzing the duffel bag discovered a single strand of hair tangled in the zipper. Initial testing confirmed it belonged to Amelia, but further analysis revealed a second DNA profile on the bag, a profile that didn't match Lucas. This discovery reignited the possibility of a second individual's involvement, though who that person was remained a mystery. The investigation had reached a critical juncture. The evidence pointed to a deliberate effort to conceal Amelia's disappearance, and Lucas was undeniably at the center of it all. Yet the possibility of an accomplice complicated the narrative, introducing new questions about motive and execution. As Delgado reviewed the case file late one night, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of uncovering a much darker truth than they had anticipated. Amelia Carter's disappearance had started as a search for a missing woman. Now it was transforming into something far more complex, a case of hidden layers, tangled motives, and secrets that refused to stay buried. As the investigation advanced, the lens of suspicion increasingly focused on Lucas Bennett. Each piece of evidence, while circumstantial on its own, began to paint a cohesive and troubling picture. Detective Aaron Delgado knew that unraveling the truth required narrowing their scope and dissecting Lucas's actions with precision. For all his outward composure, Lucas's life was unraveling under scrutiny. The discovery of Amelia Carter's belongings at the construction site, the financial fraud in her name, and the mounting inconsistencies in his statements had eroded the polished image he had worked so hard to maintain. As Delgado pieced together Lucas's timeline, the meticulousness of his movements stood out, not as the actions of a concerned fiancé, but as those of a man carefully orchestrating a cover-up. One key detail was Lucas's behavior in the days immediately following Amelia's disappearance. While he had initially seemed cooperative, subtle cracks in his demeanor began to appear. Colleagues noted how Lucas, usually the epitome of professionalism, had grown withdrawn and unusually tense. He avoided casual conversations and became noticeably irritable when asked about Amelia, deflecting questions with statements that seemed rehearsed. At the same time, his outward participation in vigils and media appeals felt oddly performative to those closest to Amelia. He spoke about her in past tense on several occasions, an unintentional slip that did not go unnoticed by investigators. The turning point came when Delgado's team uncovered discrepancies in Lucas's digital footprint. Forensic analysis of his laptop revealed a string of deleted searches, painstakingly recovered by specialists. Among the recovered queries were terms like how to clean bloodstains, fastest decomposition methods, and abandoned sites near Crestwood. These findings aligned disturbingly with Lucas's known movements and the discovery of Amelia's belongings, offering a chilling glimpse into his mindset. Delgado ordered Lucas to be brought in for another round of questioning. This time the focus was sharper, the questions more deliberate. Lucas's calm demeanor had been an effective shield in earlier interviews, but Delgado's team was prepared to dismantle it piece by piece. They began with the inconsistencies in his timeline, pressing him on the early morning departure captured on the surveillance footage. Lucas maintained that he had gone for a drive to clear his head, but when confronted with the discovery of soil in his car's trunk matching the construction site, his explanation faltered. He suggested that the soil might have been transferred unintentionally from a previous visit to the area, a claim Delgado found unconvincing. The focus shifted to the financial evidence. Confronted with the forged loan applications and the diversion of funds into a shadow account, Lucas grew visibly agitated. He insisted that the loans were legitimate and that Amelia had agreed to help him through a difficult financial period. However, this narrative directly contradicted statements from Amelia's friends, who described her growing concerns about Lucas's secrecy in the weeks before her disappearance. Then came the moment Delgado had been waiting for. The recovered internet searches were presented, one by one. As Lucas sat silently, his expression hardened. For the first time, the polished mask slipped, revealing flashes of anger and frustration. When pressed on why he had searched for how to clean bloodstains, Lucas offered no response. His silence was deafening, a stark contrast to his earlier attempts to control the narrative. While the evidence mounted, Delgado knew they still lacked one critical piece: definitive proof of what had happened to Amelia. Without a body or a clear account of events, the case remained vulnerable to reasonable doubt. Delgado turned his attention back to the construction site, convinced it held more answers than they had yet uncovered. A second sweep of the area, this time utilizing ground-penetrating radar, revealed an anomaly beneath a concrete slab. The slab, partially obscured by vegetation, appeared to have been poured recently, its surface uneven and poorly finished. Excavation began immediately, and what investigators found beneath the slab confirmed Delgado's worst fears. Wrapped in layers of plastic was a set of human remains, partially decomposed but intact enough for identification. The recovery was handled with utmost care, ensuring no detail was overlooked. Preliminary analysis indicated the body belonged to a young woman matching Amelia's description. Forensic experts worked quickly to confirm the identity through dental records and DNA analysis. The discovery of Amelia's body was a devastating blow to her family and friends, but for investigators, it was the breakthrough they needed to solidify their case against Lucas. Delgado wasted no time preparing the arrest warrant, ensuring every piece of evidence was meticulously documented. Lucas Bennett, the grieving fiancé turned prime suspect, was about to face the full weight of the law. On the day of his arrest, Lucas's demeanor was colder than ever. As officers led him from his apartment in handcuffs, he maintained a stony silence, refusing to answer questions or acknowledge the crowd of onlookers gathered outside. To the residents of Crestwood City, it was a shocking fall from grace for a man who had once been celebrated as a pillar of success and respectability. Back at the precinct, Lucas was formally charged with murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The interrogation room, now filled with evidence linking him to Amelia's death, became the stage for his first official response to the accusations. Lucas, however, remained defiant, insisting on his innocence despite the overwhelming evidence. His silence about the specifics of Amelia's death only deepened the sense of unease surrounding his actions. As the investigation transitioned into the prosecutorial phase, Delgado reflected on the case's harrowing complexity. Lucas Bennett had been a man of control over his image, his finances, and ultimately over the woman he claimed to love. Yet it was that very need for control that had unraveled him. Amelia's disappearance, once shrouded in mystery, had revealed a chilling truth. Behind Lucas's polished exterior lay a man willing to sacrifice everything, even another life, to maintain his facade. Lucas Bennett's arrest sent shockwaves through Crestwood City. The man once seen as a polished professional and a devoted fiancé now stood accused of the brutal murder of Amelia Carter. The trial, which unfolded over the course of several weeks, became a media spectacle, drawing intense public interest. For Amelia's family and friends, it was a painful but necessary journey toward justice. The prosecution's case was built on a foundation of damning evidence. Forensic analysis confirmed that the remains found at the construction site belonged to Amelia. The plastic wrapping bore Lucas's fingerprints, and traces of the industrial cleaning agent found in his car matched substances present on the body. The internet searches, the financial fraud, and the timeline discrepancies all pointed toward a deliberate and premeditated crime. But the most shocking revelation came during the trial, when the role of a second individual, a suspected accomplice, was brought to light. Eric Turner, a handyman with a criminal record who occasionally worked for Lucas, emerged as a key figure. Under pressure from law enforcement and faced with charges of accessory to murder, Turner agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony provided a chilling glimpse into the events surrounding Amelia's death. According to Turner, Lucas had approached him weeks before Amelia's disappearance with an unusual request. Lucas claimed he needed help disposing of construction waste at an abandoned site outside the city. Turner, who was struggling financially, agreed without asking many questions. On the night of Amelia's disappearance, Lucas called Turner, instructing him to meet at the site. When Turner arrived, he was met with the sight of the duffel bag. Lucas was calm but insistent, instructing Turner to assist in digging a hole and pouring the concrete slab that would later conceal the remains. Turner claimed he didn't know the bag contained a body until news of Amelia's disappearance broke days later. While Turner's testimony placed additional blame on Lucas, it also highlighted the lengths to which Lucas had gone to cover his tracks. The prosecution painted a picture of a man desperate to maintain control over his crumbling life, resorting to violence when Amelia discovered his financial deceit. In her final moments, Amelia had confronted Lucas about the forged loans, threatening to leave him and expose his lies. In a fit of rage, Lucas killed her, setting in motion a calculated effort to erase all evidence of his crime. Lucas's defense team attempted to cast doubt on Turner's credibility, suggesting that he had acted alone or exaggerated his involvement to secure a plea deal. They argued that the financial evidence and internet searches, while incriminating, were not direct proof of Lucas's guilt. However, the jury was unconvinced. The weight of the evidence, combined with Lucas's stoic and emotionless demeanor throughout the trial, left little room for reasonable doubt. When the verdict was delivered, guilty of first-degree murder and multiple counts of fraud, Lucas showed no visible reaction. Amelia's family, seated in the front row of the courtroom, held hands tightly as the reality of justice settled in. Lucas was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a punishment that reflected the gravity of his crimes. For Eric Turner, the reduced sentence came with conditions, including mandatory counseling and community service upon his release. While Turner's role in the crime was peripheral compared to Lucas's, his willingness to assist in covering up the murder left an indelible stain on his conscience. In the months following the trial, Crestwood City struggled to come to terms with the tragedy. For many, Amelia's death served as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk behind seemingly perfect facades. Her family established the Amelia Carter Foundation, an organization dedicated to raising awareness about emotional manipulation, financial abuse, and the warning signs of toxic relationships. The foundation quickly became a beacon of hope for individuals seeking to break free from controlling or abusive situations. Detective Delgado, reflecting on the case, emphasized the importance of vigilance and empathy in protecting those who might be vulnerable. He noted that Amelia's friends had sensed something was wrong but hadn't known how to act. Sometimes, he remarked, the smallest signs of trouble can be the loudest cries for help. Amelia Carter's story is one of heartbreak and loss, but it also carries profound lessons. It reminds us of the importance of listening to our instincts and supporting those who may be in silent distress. Her death highlighted how control, deceit, and desperation can culminate in unimaginable acts, underscoring the need for open communication and trust in relationships. This case also revealed the power of a community coming together in the face of tragedy. While justice for Amelia could never bring her back, it offered closure to her family and a chance to honor her memory through meaningful action. Her legacy now lives on through the lives she continues to impact, reminding everyone that no act of advocacy or awareness is too small to make a difference. The story has been edited to ensure personal privacy and security regarding names and locations. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to see the latest and most thrilling family crime stories.